ADHD Rewired, episode 476. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Nate. Nate is a program manager for the Department of Defense and a graduate student at Columbia University. He received an ADHD diagnosis in 2016 at the age of 24 and a bipolar disorder diagnosis last year. After better understanding his mental abilities and inabilities, he realized how incompatible he was with the person the world expected him to be. This experience has led Nate down a path to highlight the tremendous potential and value that neurodivergent individuals can bring to an organization, despite the story their resume may or may not tell. Nate, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So I'm curious when you hear me introducing you and I say, here's Nate from the Department of Defense, is there a little bit of like, that's badass?
Sometimes, and then there's an occasional, that might be a put off to some people. So I try and balance it out with getting to know them and them getting to know me and understand what I'm trying to do.
So how does a late diagnosed ADHDer become a program manager for the Department of Defense? And should we be concerned?
I think it's a fluke. And yeah, you probably should. And there's two sides of the coin, right? You should be concerned that I got here with the resume I had. And I think you should also be simultaneously concerned that there are not more of us because of the resumes we have and the experiences that we're not able to get and document because of what we're being told or the judgments of others and the opportunities that other people are willing to give us. It's not that we don't want to do things, and we are probably very capable of doing a lot. It's just there's these gates that you need to get through, or that people believe you need to get through. And I think that's where I'm slowly learning what I would like to have my impact on the world be.
So you had this sort of phrase, the quantification does not basically equal the qualification.
Exactly.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So my belief is what employers and colleges and basically anything that you really need to apply to, they are looking for a quantification. And that is to reduce their risk of, hiring someone that may not work out in their opinion. So they prefer someone that is you might call a known good, that they have this degree from this university, they have this job experience, and they have these skills and maybe some certifications. And so that on paper says, all right, this person's qualified. Whereas a neurodivergent individual, because of the way things are structured for us growing up, especially in the education system, the accommodations for us to succeed in that realm are just that. They're accommodating. They're not changing the structure of what the system is to meet the needs of everybody. It's the same system, and we are given a chance to fit into it. So we've just been so focused on quantifying individuals and expecting them to prove their worth that we fail to consider that inherent value someone can bring when you don't just reduce them down to a few pieces of paper.
So you were diagnosed not that long ago, 8 years ago. In high school, you said you had a 1.9 GPA. Talk to us about kind of what schooling was like for you prior to diagnosis.
It was difficult. And I had a hard time with math. There's a lot of research going on right now that, especially with Temple Grandin's book that just came out, Visual Thinking, that algebra is a big stopping point for a lot of ADHDers or visual thinkers. And it's just one of those things that for some reason, it's a huge part of where I can go in life. Right now, it's something I would need to get over to get into a PhD program. But in high school, I had this nagging feeling that I could do more, but I didn't know what it was. And when you're in that age, you don't know what's out there. And you're also being shown and told by others that you're not meeting the requirements that you would need to do the things that you aspire to. So you get into that, I don't know, that sad state where you're kind of beholden to the perspective and the judgment of others, as well as their compassion to give you opportunities. And then that determines your worth and value. And that's where you start to derive your own sense of potential and self. So it wasn't that I was incapable, is that I was incapable in the boundaries that I had to operate in at that time.
But the
So
context, tools,
yeah.
resources, under self-awareness.
Hmm. Exactly.
So you did get into an undergrad program, and your
Hmm.
undergrad it was in leadership.
Yep.
What
Yes.
made you want to go into that?
So it was something that I had started getting interested in once I had my job with the DoD, that I prefer to work with people and understand them and help them achieve what I think is their potential. And even if it's not doing what they're working on with me at the time, sometimes you need to go chase your own dreams. I was also interested in that because I had experienced a lot of leaders and just general people in charge that didn't understand how to interact with people like me or like us. Not that we're all the same, but they didn't know what to do with someone that is, a little out there sometimes. But when you see something and you bring it up in terms of an idea or an observation, it's usually something that's fairly profound, and it takes them a little bit of realization to understand that, you know, your your capabilities are sometimes aligned differently within what they're used to seeing, but they're extremely valuable.
Mm.
And it's not something that you can just, it's not tangible all the time.
So how did you do in college? Because you not diagnosed with ADHD in college, or did you go to college a little bit later?
Yeah, so I actually just graduated my undergrad last year in August. So
Okay, so you
I
had
had been,
time off in between high school and college.
yes, because I went into the military. So I was in the Air Force for 8 years. I went in right after high school because what else can you do with a 1.9 GPA? And they were happy to have me.
It reminds
So
me of that lyric from, have you ever seen the, musical Avenue Q? It's like,
no,
there's a line goes, "What can you do with a BA in English?"
see, yeah, that's kind of that's how I felt. And now I would say I'd love to hire someone who has a BA in English. So it's like that's where I'm getting at is, I don't care what your degree in is. I want to talk to you. I want to understand what you would like to do and what you see your strengths are. But I did well in my undergrad. Ended up with a 3.5. But this was after my journey while I was in the military. Your performance report is based on what you do and all this. And so basically, if you're not in college classes, you're not going to get as good as a review as others. And so I started at American Military University, online school. Wasn't ready for that. Got dropped academically. Then I was like, oh man, I still need to do this. I'll try again. So I went to the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Same thing. I wasn't doing what I wanted to do for myself, but at the same time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Then I started at Western Governors University, which was at your own pace, which is probably the worst thing for someone with ADHD. I don't know why I thought that was going to
"You
work
could
out.
take as long as you need." "Oh, I will."
Yeah, exactly. As long as you need, and then I'll do 10 of these classes in the last
Oh,
week.
man, yeah,
Uh,
that's the kiss of death of, the due date of whenever you get around to it, you can just
yeah,
turn it in. "Oh, no, 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 make up a date. Don't ever tell me, like, just whenever you get around to it."
exactly. And like a lot of us do, we think it's going to work out. Like for some reason, it will work out because sometimes it does, and so
Oh,
you
that's
just
true.
bank on it. But it did not. So again, another academic withdrawal. So then it was a couple of years later, 2020, about July, and I had just by chance talked to someone from work on the phone, and she was asking about my degree or education. And I mean, this is not even what the purpose of the call was. So, long story short, she kind of inspires me to at least apply. And this time I wanted to go to a school that was local and at least well respected. Not that the other ones aren't, because again, I don't hate on where your degree comes from, but I was very interested in just the other people that I would meet and the opportunity to interact with some of those folks. So they took a chance on me. I was never fully admitted when I got in. It was like an academic probation, basically. So I had to pass a certain amount of classes with at least a B because they saw my transcripts and they were like, on one hand, your references were great and your job performance is amazing. And then on the other hand, you look like you can't tie your shoes. So, what gives? But I did well because the curriculum was engaging and I kind of started to narrow down what I thought I wanted to do. And at the same time, you're exposed to more opportunities of like, oh, this is a job, or what's a consultant, or you can actually do this. So from there, I I did what I needed to do to get it done, and also knowing that if I got dropped from this school, there wasn't going to be another one. You can't get punted from 5 schools, and then the sixth one's going to take a chance on you.
How much of that sort of factor do you think really played into kind of your sort of brain activating and really focusing on what you needed to do?
I think it was a lot of it. Like, honestly, there were times where I didn't wanna do the homework. I mean, and it's not like I didn't have missing assignments half the time. The professors were just very accommodating beyond the accommodation, and I think it's because when we do something, we do it great. We do good work, and
How much
it's
of
different.
you getting those accommodations beyond the accommodations were based on you building a relationship with your professors?
I would say quite a bit, and truly engaging with the material. And I know it outwardly appears as if it's a bit of disrespect to a professor when you don't turn the assignment in on time. But I really tried my hardest that when I did turn it in, it was going to be very engaging with the curriculum. I was going to do it to my absolute fullest potential. And I wanted them to know what I thought. And that was really a lot of the motivation too, was you think yeah, I can't do some things like a lot of people can, like simply turn in my stuff on time. But we can give you a different perspective that maybe other students aren't going to be able to give you. And I think that's in the long term, especially to an academic institution, it's more valuable than if I had got it in 2 days earlier. So it's a catch 22. Do you give everybody a crutch, or do all the other students get extra time? Maybe they would have turned in different work, but I think that's just a part of the human condition and trying to apply the same standards to everyone who we also simultaneously acknowledge people aren't the same. So that's kind of where I'm trying to head.
Well, we know that despite all of us probably listening here have ADHD. There is a saying that I say first came from the world of autism, but I think equally applies to ADHD. Is that if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD.
Hmm.
We all have uniquely kind of wired brains, despite having a lot of overlapping characteristics. So, when we come back from the break, let's kind of keep diving into your story and talk about how do we kind of do the things that we are wanting to do when maybe on paper it doesn't look like we should be given this opportunity, but we also know that given the opportunity to do whatever it is that we want to do, we could do great things with it. So we will be right back. Support for this podcast comes from our award-winning intensive online coaching and accountability groups at coachingrewired.com. Our spring season of coaching groups is starting this week on March 30th. So if you're wondering if there's still time for you to join, then now is the time. Don't wait. Go now to coachingrewired.com to add your name to our spring interest list, and we will send you the steps of what you need to do. Here at ADHD Rewired, our coaching groups provide a space that's shame-free and judgment-free, growing alongside other adults with ADHD who actually empathize and understand one another. It's a space where members can work together, developing skills and strategies to start reducing the feelings of overwhelm, to flounder less, and begin to flourish. So if you want to learn how to better manage your time, have your calendar reflect your priorities while setting healthy boundaries, creating actionable steps to follow through with your intentions, improve your self-talk, all while having a community of like-wired brains to support you along the way, then this is the group you've been looking for. As of this episode, on March 28th, our spring season of coaching groups is only 2 days away. Go now to coachingrewired.com to get your name added to our interest list so we can help you join us on March 30th. Sure, we offer tools and ways to help better manage our ADHD, but this is so much more than just about the tools. It's really about staying curious, learning the power of flexibility, being resilient, and having a community of like-wired brains to provide support when we do stumble and fall. Because time and time again, the members of our groups prove that we can do hard things, and you can too. Come grow with us. Go to coachingrewired.com to get started. That's coachingrewired.com. Are you new to ADHD Rewired? If so, welcome. If you're a long-time listener, welcome back. Because support for this podcast comes from you, our listeners. Do you want some answers to your ADHD-related questions? And you can join me and the rest of the ADHD Rewired podcast family and ADHD Rewired coaches every second Tuesday of the month for our monthly live Q&A on Zoom. Don't want to forget? Then go now to ADHDrewired.com/events to register so you can get notified about our next live Q&A on Tuesday, April 11th at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. But wait, are you hearing about the ADHD Rewired podcast family for the first time? We have other podcasts here on the ADHD Rewired podcast network, including ADHD Essentials with Brendan Mahan, Hacking Your ADHD with Will Curb, and ADHD Diversified with MJ Siemens. And there's another one coming. It's coming soon. Find everything ADHD Rewired, including our adult study hall community for virtual co-working, our podcast archives, show notes, our other shows, and our coaching groups by going to ADHDrewired.com. It's all at ADHDrewired.com. And thanks for listening. All right, we are back with Nate. All right, Nate. So you did well in your undergrad program. You were able to build the relationships with professors, despite getting a lot of your stuff in late. It was still you made it work for you. What are some of the other sort of things that you think led to you being able to make that work for you? Because I think there are probably listeners out there right now who say, well, that's good for Nate, but if I was late on my stuff, I would get fired.
Yeah, no, and it's true. And unfortunately, I think my answer is to just never accept that is okay, that it's not us and it's not them personally. It's the way that things have been constructed. And I don't want to keep harkening on this notion of it's the system. But to a certain extent, education and honestly, a lot of opportunities are just geared towards the majority. So if you're not in that, you are working uphill to meet that. So my best advice is to not internalize anything as if you are the problem, and don't take the frustration out on a single individual, but keep doing what you can to chase after or get to what you think you would like to do. And if it takes you a long time to find that, just know that you could have done anything, whether or not that is your opportunity that you're given. I think that's what makes me kind of the most sad and drives me towards what I'd like to do is those people who do get to the end of their life and think that they haven't done anything. And it's not that they couldn't, but your potential can only rise to the occasions it's presented. So I try and give people the assurance that I don't know exactly what they're capable of, but I genuinely believe it doesn't have a limit.
You use the phrase to rise to the occasion. And I think with ADHD, there's a lot of sort of rising up from failures, from missteps, from, if there's a way to screw something up, we could probably figure that out. Right.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think it takes for someone who is, been fired multiple times, has tried, higher education multiple times to what do you think that I don't know, I don't want to say missing ingredient is or that key, but what do you think it really takes to have that resilient spirit to keep on going?
I would like to say that this isn't sponsored by Adderall, but and as much as I'd like to say education as well, it's not everyone has that opportunity. And so I don't know for the individual who's been down on their luck like that to be able to come up. I think it's on the rest of us who are in positions to not help those people, but enable them to find that potential. It's almost our, responsibility to our small little community that we belong to enable those changes that we'd like to see. And if you see someone who's in that position, do what you can to help them down their path that they'd like to go down, or at least give them a starting point. I think some of the things that I really don't like to see, especially in the autism spectrum disorder community, is a company that will hire someone on the guise of under the guise of neurodiversity, and they give this person a job cleaning the hallway or something like that, and they're patting themselves on the back for giving this individual a job when it's more to appear as if you're playing the part that's the popular thing to do right now than actually believing in what that person can add to your organization. So a lot of us, while we definitely are not the same, there are some tendencies that kind of go across the community and in ASD as well. So it's just, I think, a general lack of awareness. And I have also noticed that the people that are in charge of these programs and hiring, very few of them suffer from some of these conditions. So, we need to, or I would like to see more of us, for lack of a better word, infiltrate some of these positions and institutions and be advocates for those people that they're just not able to have that positive self talk anymore. There's no more affirmations left for them because these people have been telling them what they can do, and that's what they've internalized. So that's kind of what I've noticed and where I believe we can make a difference.
Part of what it sounds like your message is it's about the discovery of things that like the potential that you have internally that the environment that you're in may not be conducive to bringing this out, right?
Yep.
And I think a lot of ways you take that sort of recipe, like with ADHD, like seems like it's a prime place for entrepreneurship, right? So
Yes.
so it's like if you have these ideas, these things that are creative or innovative, or you're looking at an issue that you're struggling with. I mean, it's one of the best things to do is build a business out of something that you need yourself. And this is
Yes.
exactly what I did with my coaching program. Like I was looking for something that had a way more intense accountability because like I knew what I wanted to do, but I knew that I also got like sidetracked and derailed and would lose steam pretty quickly,
Hmm.
right? And so I created what I needed for myself. So well, it takes courage, and there's also a level of, I think, privilege that is involved in being
100%.
able to take time to try to develop something that may or may not work, right?
Yeah.
But how do we shift from I've failed at, school, I failed at my jobs, like what else could I do?
Yeah, I think the entrepreneurship thing is something great to bring up. There are studies that have shown that ADHD entrepreneurs have been associated with definitely higher levels of innovative ideas for their ambitions. Just that different perspective of seeing a need for something that isn't being filled because they have that special vision. So doing that, and I think just telling your story, and I believe that could go quite a long way in maybe developing something that you would like to do, and then building that, I don't know, that coalition of folks around you, because I have ideas, and I know a lot of us have ideas, and everyone has ideas, but then it sounds great, and you can prove it out, but then it relies on algebra, or I want to build, an algorithm for something, or it relies on accountability during tax season and making sure your receipts are kept properly and in order for your LLC. It's you have to have the people that can enable you and see that belief that what you're trying to do is definitely worthy, and you just might need a little extra assistance or a push to understand the process. But I think once we understand how to tackle something and have a little bit of accountability, especially if the accountability is not being able to pay your rent or your mortgage or something like that, but it definitely has to be, in my personal experience, balanced with, like I kind of told you, the thought of everything will just work out. So it's a slippery slope, but aligning with people that might be able to give you those opportunities and those chances. But I would definitely agree with the sentiment that it involves a huge amount of privilege that myself, or I guess I'll leave it to me in this scenario, but that I can have a job that I know is going to continue providing income because I have lucked up to a way of they value what I bring because of the perspective I give. And so I'm not worried about my ADHD contributing to the loss of my job. And then on the other hand, I can kind of just mess around and see what sticks and write all my crazy ideas down on my iPad until something either does or does not work out. And there's a lot of people who don't have that opportunity, and it's not just people with ADHD and ASD and neurological conditions too, right? I mean, that's pervasive in our society, unfortunately. So we have an opportunity to coalesce around each other and try and help out as many people as we can with the positions and the privilege that we are given.
Are you out about your ADHD at work?
Oh, 100%. Oh, yeah. I mean, if they didn't know, if I didn't tell them, they would have known, I think, at that point, because
How did you navigate that? Because I think, I mean, I don't know very much about the actual ins and outs of the military. All I know is something that I feel like I would not do well at, just because of my sort of pacifist nature.
Mhm.
Um, but I will often hear like, people who say, "Well, I can't tell. I want to be in the this branch or that branch of armed services." They can't know that I'm on medication or they can't know that I have ADHD. Well, so you're saying you're working at the Department of Defense and they know.
Yes, they do know, and the trick and it's not I truly was not diagnosed until later in life, but they were the ones who diagnosed me when I was active duty. And so,
Interesting.
at that point, it was not debilitating enough for me to be discharged or anything, and that it was, treatable with a routine of therapy and medication that they were able to provide. And because I had already been in for, 6 years, then that the precedent has really been established that if I was in for 6 years and you didn't think there was anything wrong and I was doing my job, then why would that change now? The barrier is really to entry that if you have ADHD or ADD and it's documented, there are some stipulations that they put on your enlistment or if you want to be an officer, things like that. So, but stuff is always changing. I think the recruitment and retention is going to bring to light that they probably will need everybody they can, and that the people that they were crossing off the list could really bring a lot to what they want to do in the future. But yeah, now, even especially after I got out, is when it was most accepted because I had kind of built this reputation of I never knew when to shut up. And B, I suppose I didn't always care if you wanted me to shut up. And C, it's definitely contrary to the whole hierarchy of the military, but I never looked at your rank or your position and thought that that made you smarter or have a better opinion than me. So I didn't walk into a room thinking that I was the smartest person there. I just wasn't afraid or apprehensive to say something different and take on that. It was a double-edged sword because if you speak up,
Is
then
this
someone's
gotten
going
you
to.
in trouble sometimes?
Oh, definitely, yeah, and made a lot of people. I think I had some haters because I was this little enlisted dude who's running around talking to people he shouldn't be talking to, except then they started to appreciate it because, I tended to tell the truth and just my view of the world instead of a view of the world that people wanted to present and maintain that wasn't always aligned with reality, but, it was a gift in the long run, so.
So how do you do this in a diplomatic way?
Ooh, I think my biggest secret weapon was my age. I was young, and as much as it pained me, I learned that the best tactic was not to talk all the time and come off as you're trying to tell people are stupid, but sit in the back of the room and observe the conversation and formulate your thoughts in a coherent way so that you have the big picture. And then when there's an opportunity to speak, you speak in a way that it's like you're illuminating this room and this conversation with insight that they didn't have, and the people who would appreciate it the most will learn to appreciate it more. They start to see you not as the rank you are, or not as the age you are, or the position, but they just start to see you as a person who can help see things differently and augment the thoughts and ideas that are occurring outside of that. So, again, I also believe that everyone has something to add, and you don't need to have ADHD or a neurological condition to not have good ideas or thoughts. I think that's pretty evident in the world, but I think we are put in a position where we kind of have to work against that in order to have our thoughts and opinions heard because sometimes our quirky behaviors, don't always match up with what you think someone who brings a lot of perspective to a complex situation would have.
So I'm curious how often you sort of are experiencing like pushback from people saying like who do you think you are or like who's this kid like does that happen fairly often and if so like how do you deal with that?
Not too often, but I found that it's linked to a certain type of person that is they don't have ADHD or ASD or any other condition for the most part, but once you get to know them, it's that they're uncomfortable with themselves. And so they see this kid or whoever that is telling them something, or they're getting the attention from this commander or from this boss, and they're reflecting on their own life of, I put a lot of work in to get to where I am. I am 40 whatever, or I went to a great school and it was difficult, and now you're telling me this kid who failed out of 4 colleges is the person you're going to listen to. And it's not that they're pushing back against you personally, it's that they don't want to recognize that people just think differently, and that you might not have to have a degree to offer insight. And so it's just towing that line of showing perspective to them, and that you're also still both human, and I'm not trying to attack you or your beliefs or your capabilities. And we all have something to add. And your education definitely gave you some insight. And, my journey has given me insight. So I think the pushback, it really helps to address it at a compassionate level with those people, because you're going to learn something from them and they're going to learn something about you. And it kind of changes the notion of what I hope to achieve, is that people inherently, regardless of what they have to show for it, can lead you to insights and perspectives and ideas about things that you just wouldn't have considered. So
Are there certain, like maybe even like phrases or things that you'll say if you realize that, ooh, I maybe pushed too hard or misread the situation, or like if you sort of enter a scenario where like, oh, this that I can tell this did not land. Like, how do you respond when you are recognizing that?
So usually it's silence followed by someone who's in the room that was designated to be my babysitter speaking up and
For real? Like,
reframing. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Okay.
reframing what I said. They were in a catch-22, because they knew at some point, no matter how diplomatic and quiet I would attempt to stay, there was something that would come out of my mouth, because a huge problem I had was the more people listened to me, the more comfortable I felt. And so I would start getting very, what I would say, passionate about things. And so you start to hear these F bombs, and you start to hear probably crude analogies about the situation. And then it would end with me categorizing the situation as they just didn't, eh, we're answering a question, we're not solving a problem. And I would get frustrated with the lack of big picture thinking. And then I would start to go on some diatribe maybe about, you guys need to think from a macro perspective, or, we're not seeing the problem. And I would again try and temper this with not a personal attack on anyone, but if something doesn't land and it gets quiet, I think it's time to kind of step back and check yourself of, you might have gotten a little too lax, or at least that's what I noticed personally, because you're almost given that freedom. Like, you've got the mic at that point, so you say what you want until they don't invite you back to the stage again. So that's what I really learned. And unfortunately, sometimes it was an outcome after the fact that you realize of, oh man, I used to get emails from these people and now I don't. So maybe maybe that was a little too much. But
Hmm. Well, speaking of being invited back to the microphone, we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to invite you back to the microphone right after this break. So we will be right back. Could you use some company while trying to pay your bills? Does your fridge need its own spring cleaning? Oh, I need to clean up my fridge because I left some chicken in there that I haven't cooked, and it's been a week. How are you doing with gathering your paperwork to get your taxes filed on time? If I'm being real honest, not well. If you think working with others will help you take off your most dreaded or boring tasks, then come work with us at adultstudyhall.com. It's only $19.99 a month, and it's free to try for the first week. Do you like working in time blocks while being able to verbally check in and give updates on your progress? Then join our ASH Plus, or Adult Study Hall Plus sessions, which are our themed and guided sessions that happen every week. But if you want to work to the beat of your own drum, then our 24/7 Drop It Room, or ASH 24/7, is open to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Try it free for the first week. It's only $19.99 a month after that. That's adultstudyhall.com. Come work with us. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our patrons over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Thank you to our patrons like Alyssa L, who just became a patron at the $25 a month level. Thank you so much. When you go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon, you'll find our perks like uninterrupted episodes starting at just $5 a month. So you don't get interrupted by those ads. We'll put them at the very end just in case you want to know what's going on at ADHD Rewired. Then patrons who join the community at $25 a month can join me every fourth Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. That means if you're listening to this early enough on the day that it came out, you can join me today. But if you want to get uninterrupted episodes but can't jump into our monthly coaching calls, then members at $10 a month can still get those episodes alongside the audio recordings of those monthly coaching calls. Really a huge thank you to our Patreon community for supporting us. It feels great to be supported, and I'm glad that we can give back just a little bit more to you, our patrons. So if you're considering becoming a patron because the work that we do has helped you along your ADHD journey in some way, go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Perks start at just $5 a month, and support can start at any amount that makes sense to you. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks, everyone. All right, we are back with Nate. So we haven't really talked much about your recent diagnosis of bipolar. So talk to us a little bit about that, kind of how that came to be and kind of how that shows up for you.
Yeah, this happened last December, so fairly recent. And it came about from a small breakdown, I think, where things were just not going right. And it was definitely related to money and spending and just, buying things that I didn't need and extending myself. And it was affecting my marriage. So it was kind of this realization of like, what's wrong with me? Because up until that point, I thought it was the ADHD. And I,
How much money and spending are we talking about?
the tens of thousands, a little under 50, but
Okay.
over 48. So,
Okay. And was it like a lot of little things, or were you getting big ticket
yeah,
items?
no, it was a lot of little things. I mean, this was over a few years, but I think that was the frustrating part is I couldn't, I can look around the house and see a few things that I definitely remember buying, but then it's like, what even is this? I think that's when you have a problem. So it was very frustrating to know there was definitely something wrong with me, that this was not normal behavior, but it wasn't something that was really, I don't know, ADHD. I think there's definitely impulsive spending associated with a lot of these conditions, but I just kind of felt like, I was on these medications and I was going to therapy. Like, this shouldn't be happening anymore. Why is this going on? And it wasn't an impulse buy in that I was unwitting of it. I generally knew that when I was buying something that I shouldn't have been doing it. And that coupled with just not knowing where this was coming from, that kind of led me to just, not lose it, but say, what, why can I not be normal? Or, that started that negative self-talk of, I just want to be like a normal person. I want to pay my bills. I want to not pay $35 to the bank for an overdraft or something like that. And I make good money. Like, it's too confusing. And the more you think about it, the more I thought about it, the more it just felt like something more was there and it was off. So my wife and I kind of talked more, and I was talking to my therapist and just went through some of the screenings and questions, and it kind of went from there.
Have you kind of cycled through your life, like through mania and depression, or
Yeah.
yeah?
Oh, yeah. So now
And
that it's been brought to my attention, you go back and you're like, oh, I see. When I thought, I used to just not like a certain time of year. And then, the more you talk to someone, I suppose it's not completely something everyone may feel. Or the debt is definitely a classic trait that is researched and associated with bipolar disorder. And then there would be times when I was definitely just super into something, and it's beyond what I would categorize now as what I thought was hyper focus. It was like day, night, day, night, day, night. Then you're done with it. And I would get just in a mood, I suppose, in a depressive state. So not not a type 2 sort of state, but
And for
it's
listeners
just
that don't, type 2 is more that depressive state. I always try to remember it as type 2 is blue.
type 1 is fun. I
Yes,
remember
type
you
1 is
saying
fun.
that. Yep.
Yes, yep. And
So
did
in
you find that when you were in sort of some of your manic episodes that like did you enjoy that, or was it part of you that like was kind of frightened by it, or how was that experience for you?
No, I don't know if this is a good thing to say. I thought it was awesome.
And I've heard people with bipolar say that they love their mania.
Yeah.
And so when I think about like, well, if that feels good, and we know that with ADHD alone, like if this feels good, wouldn't more feel better?
Yeah.
Right? Like how do you regulate if you're on this wave of something that feels good, even though you intellectually probably know the crash is gonna hurt?
Yeah. And it's like it's almost as if you think that you're going to solve problems that have been plaguing science and society for hundreds of years. I mean, I went
Yes.
into this deep dive of quantum mechanics that I thought I was going to come up with a new theory of the universe and it was going to unify everything. And we were finally going to combine relativity with quantum mechanics and all these other notions. And I mean, this was a week-long deep dive, and you think you're doing it. And I learned a lot. Like I love speed reading through, and because I'm still in school now, you can download any book for free. And so it's like this, I don't have to pay money for this craziness anymore. You just go through these episodes of I'm gonna figure it out. I can do it, and I'm gonna show these people that, they've just been looking at it wrong the whole time. And I finally understood it. But I think that's what leads into some of the depressive state is that then you start coming off of the mania and you start reading what you wrote, and you're like, first of all, these are the documents of a crazy person. It just looked like, when you have like the serial killer shows, right? And they have the detectives have this web of like, strings and pins. And I mean, that's what it's like, except it's just on an iPad. It looks just as crazy. And some of the things I think are true insights that I now work into my research that I'm doing as well as my job. But then some things you write down of like, am I even here? Do I exist? Then you're like, okay, maybe there was something going on that wasn't quite healthy. Then it progresses a little further after you start reading what you wrote, in that you spent a week probably getting little sleep, affecting your family, your work, and other things you're doing for you to figure out that you might have stumbled upon something that really wasn't there. That's personally the worst part for me, is just the realization that I wasted time in a period where I did not think I was wasting time, only to find out now that I'm a week behind on all the things that I need to be doing to pursue the goals that I actually want to pursue.
So
So,
how are you managing that now? Like, so when you like,
yeah.
because I mean, it's cyclical. So like,
Mhm,
are you cognizant of sort of the earlier signs of mania? Like,
mhm.
have you enlisted the help of family to sort of give you that feedback? Like, hey, it's looking like mania. Like, how, talk about that.
Yeah. So I was put on lamotrigine, and that has helped, especially with I go to therapy once a week. And the key is what you just mentioned, is letting people know. I have been a fairly open person, except for the things that are closed that no one will ever know about, right? But I told like friends of, I have kids in elementary school, and we become friends with the parents. And so I told them that some of those that we hang out with on the weekends and stuff of, hey, I talked to my wife about this, but you guys have a different view, that you don't see me every day. And so you might notice, a more drastic change over a few days than my wife would notice over, 72 hours of being with me. So definitely let them know. And in terms of therapy, talking through, again, what you said of what are the signs. So if it's 1:30 in the morning, and I'm writing stuff down on my iPad and I've downloaded more than 5 books, like it's happening.
Mm.
And we talked about a strategy to how can you harness this without making it harmful, of just know that that cognitive ability is still there in a manic state or not, that it's not, this isn't limitless. It's not unlocking a different part of your brain. It's just a different perspective. And so capture what you can. Don't let it affect your life, which is easier said than done. We all have different cases, right? But I have learned, especially since I'm in school, to focus that mania or those thoughts on a topic that I can actually deep dive into for it's purposeful. I mean, we have all these projects and papers and research to do. So if I'm interested in something, I think I don't know, with the ADHD, you're very good at tying anything and justifying anything. And so making the connection to what I'm supposed to be doing. And that allows me the freedom to explore that without hindering the things that I need to do. So work has been pretty accommodating with that as well, if it's something interesting or technology related. So, again, though, that's a huge privilege that not everybody has of their manic states contributing to their life. So, maybe the reverse is the optimal of finding ways for organizations to see the value of some of these thoughts and thinking and reward it instead of hinder it. But then, if you read An Unquiet Mind, the biggest thing that she mentions is that you can't rely on this for the rest of your life and it does need to be treated. So I don't want to give off the wrong message here that everyone should embrace their mania and it's a good thing, because for a lot of people it's not. And those depressive states are very dangerous.
Well, it's
So,
probably in some ways like comparable to the double-edged sword of hyperfocus, right? It's like you can get a ton done, going deep for many hours, but the cost of that is like probably when you come out of that and probably the next day, you're probably gonna be pretty worthless when it comes to getting shit done,
yeah,
right?
100%. Yeah. And it's, it's like it's so fun when you're in it. And then when you're not, I think because it is a different frame of mind, it's hard to see the value of one while you're in the other and vice versa. When I'm in a manic state, again, I'm like, this is great. Well, I don't ever want to be the not manic version of myself. You don't think you're as smart or as capable of managing or handling complex situations. But then when you're out of it fully, you say, man, crazy Nate or manic Nate is a little much. It's just not sustainable. I try and think about, I guess, the brain like any other muscle that, if you work it hard enough at 100 miles an hour for every other, couple weeks or something, it doesn't have the lifespan. I don't know. I'm sure there's research out there to say that that's not true, but in my mind, it feels like I'm just like thinking myself to death, and it's not. It's You get the perspective that it's not like what am I helping or who is benefiting from this if I can't turn it into something actionable? Like, does my 3-year-old or my 7-year-old care that I'm attempting to solve quantum mechanics and quantum theory or whatever other thing that I'm on? Like, nobody cares. So it's a very big picture reconciliation with yourself and the world with what is important. A lot of us seek it externally, and then you come to find out that it's really just it's where you are. It's where you are right then.
Mm.
No matter what I think about the composition of quantum wave breakdowns or whatever, like my kids are here, like they're there, I can see them. And so it doesn't matter. That's kind of where I've started to realize. And coincidentally, that was the other thing that I wanted to deep dive on was that I see a lot of research in very specific fields as a form of therapy and being able to explain your existence that you're never going to get to. So it's very interesting, especially being in it at one point of hypothetically, what if I figured this out? Like, it doesn't change anything. I still have a 7-year-old I need to take to school and a 3-year-old that might poop his pants every once in a while. Like, so what, so it's interesting, but some people need that. And I don't know. I think it's a larger human question that I can't solve in this state of mind right now.
Well, it's interesting, Nick, as been listening to you sort of share your story and your perspectives. I think so much of probably how you've gotten to where you are now sounds like it's really been through a lens of openness and curiosity.
Yeah.
How could I do this? Like, what would it mean if I did this? Like, how could I try this? What did this mean? Oh, this shitty thing happened. What can I learn from that? And when we have a neurodivergent brain, we have to stay open and stay out of judgment and stay curious because when we do that we are going to learn those lessons. I love that quote. I think it's by Zig Ziglar. It says that a failure ceases to be one the moment we learn from it, something
Yeah.
like that. I think I botched that, but that's
No.
the idea. And so whether it's that open discovery of kind of how your brain works, or it's you have this potential, but the opportunity has not shown up yet. And so, how do we create those opportunities for ourselves? So I think it just speaks to this idea that, like, all right, so if plan A and the quote unquote normal approach to life isn't working, well, there's 25 other letters in the alphabet, and there's plenty of ways to do what we're trying to do. And maybe you got to invent a way to do it. But like, if you feel it, don't don't let the quote unquote system get you down.
Yep. I would say don't convince yourself, and I mean, you said it great. And don't convince yourself that what you're thinking is crazy or not true. And sometimes it might be, but just because you haven't heard an opinion that aligns with it doesn't mean that your insight isn't valuable. But I did want to just toss out one more quote that's my favorite from Alan Turing, which he was pretty smart and successful, but again, experienced that adversity of people understanding him. But he said, sometimes it is the people no one can imagine anything of who do the things no one can imagine. And I think that's very, very powerful that we still have that potential, and it's not about what other people see in you.
I think that is a great place to end. Nate, do you want to give any contact information if people want to reach out to you?
Sure. I am exploring just neurodiversity and neurodivergent people in the workforce and how they are getting by in their organizations. So if anyone's interested, my school email would be nsr2143@columbia.edu.
And we will put that link in the show notes to this episode. Nate, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, and wish you all the best going forward.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
All right.
Yay. That was cool. Thank you.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired podcast network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.